Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Benazir Bhutto Memorial Lecture. 40 years ago this term, Benazir Bhutto, or ex-president, made history as the first female Asian president of the Oxford Union. Leading the Union in Hillary term 1977, she shattered barriers, paving the way for greater diversity in leadership. She later achieved an even greater milestone, becoming the first woman to lead a Muslim-majority nation, dedicating her life to democracy, equality, and justice. Her courage and unwavering commitment to democracy continue to inspire generations worldwide. To honor her extraordinary legacy, the Oxford Union proudly hosts this annual lecture. In her name, as a Pakistani, it is a profound privilege for me to preside over this event during my tenure. And it's my great honor to welcome tonight's speakers, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, chairman of the Pakistan's People Party and former foreign minister of Pakistan. Bilawal carries a forward legacy of leadership and public service. As a fellow, an alumnus of Oxford and a member of the Oxford Union, he stands at the forefront of Pakistan's political landscape. Please join me in welcoming Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. You can do the lecture there.
I go straight?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's such an honor and a privilege to be back here at Oxford University. Before I start with my memorial lecture, I want to take a moment to recognize that our very able, capable president of the Oxford Union is also from Pakistan. But at the same time, the librarian of the Oxford Union is also from Pakistan. The treasurer of the Oxford Union is also Pakistani. And I believe the secretary of the Oxford Union is now also Pakistani. So I'm having a real Empire Strikes Back moment here at the Oxford Union. And obviously, it fills me with a great sense of pride. My mother, Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, was born on the 21st of June, 1953. The longest day in the year. And as her son, I don't, without a moment's hesitation, it's almost like the sun refused to set the day she was born. Benazir means one without equal. And that she really was. Obviously, you know, or you may know, that she went to Harvard at the age of 16. Then she was here at Oxford. She was elected the first Asian woman to be president of the Oxford Union. I'm assuming the first Muslim woman to be president of the Oxford Union, and only the sixth woman ever to be elected to the president of this prestigious society. She then went back to Pakistan at the age of 25 to lead the resistance against Pakistan's the most brutal dictatorship we've seen in all our history. And given that Pakistan has spent half its time directly ruled by the military or under dictatorship, that's not any small feat. After leading that resistance in the fall of the dictator, she went on to become the first woman elected to lead a Muslim majority country. She was prime minister not once, but twice, and ultimately and tragically assassinated when she led her final campaign against dictatorship and violent extremism. I was born in 1988. And in that 1 year, my mother, finished her first book, gave birth to her first child, and led and won her first national election campaign and became the Prime Minister of Pakistan, all at the age of 35. In 1990, she was the Prime Minister of Pakistan for the second time. And my sister Bakhtaur was born, and she was the first child born to a sitting Prime Minister. In fact, I didn't realize this until recently, she was the only child born to a sitting Prime Minister until Jacinda from New Zealand broke that record as well. So not only did she achieve all that, something that you take for granted at the time, but now looking back is all the more astounding. She also managed, much to my chagrin at the time, to make it to about 90% of our PTA meetings. We would have dinner as a family whenever she was, we were all in the same place, every night together. Every Friday, we'd do our Friday prayers and go to the mosque and read the Quran. And honestly, in the 19 years that I knew her, I can't remember one day, just one day that she took off because she was sick or she had a flu or nowadays Gen Z have mental days, not mental days, mental health days. Not one. So yeah, Benazir, literally, one without equal. And honestly, don't laugh, but honestly, if there was one word that I would use to describe her, it's just good. Like good. In the purest sense of the word. In every imaginable way, she was just good. Both in the grander good versus evil sense of the term, but just down to how she was as a person. I don't know how, for example, we're here at the Oxford Union. She went on to be a politician. She was the politician while she was here, I guess, in the Oxford sense. And you all know the term hacking, right? I'm sure you love them for that. Can you imagine being a politician, a national, global politician, and never actually hacking? She didn't just make small talk or pleasantries, she had a genuine connection with each and every single person that she met. She would remember you, your family background, whatever you talked about. She would stay in touch with you. This is before social media and Instagram and Twitter and with BBM and email. It's not humanly possible. I can't do it. In fact, being a politician, I completely understand why the term good is not associated with politicians by and large. And I would honestly often advise or stress that no one should view politicians as good or evil. You should view them as human. But she was honestly the exception that proved the rule. I remember asking her, must have been 17, maybe 18 at the time, and we were at the dinner table, and I was like, so your grandfather was hanged, your brother was murdered, your husband has spent 8.5 years in prison. So when you're Prime Minister, why don't you do this to all the people who are putting you through all this difficulty? Right now, and she sort of thought for a minute, and she's like, well, there's 24 hours in a day. And either I spend those 24 hours exacting my revenge, or I spend those 24 hours getting something done, and that's what I choose to do. Obviously, I was expecting, full-on Sheikh Hasina vibes, but no. She didn't have an evil bone in her body. The criticism, the vitriol, the opposition, I've witnessed firsthand the onslaught of political, personal, sexist, just a whole host of hate that was responded to with just a smile. And it was that thinking and that logic that when my mother was also assassinated and my world fell apart and cameras were shoved in my face and it was a dictatorship at the time and we were all pretty clear, we knew why this happened, that motivated me to say that democracy is the best revenge. Because she didn't teach us vengeance. She didn't teach us how else to take revenge. As far as political challenges are concerned, I guess I could go on quite a bit, but I'm going to pick out one because she didn't, and I think it's important. One challenge that was a constant challenge, a persistent challenge, something that affected her, I think, every day of her life, is the fact that she was a woman. Just that she was a woman. That was her primary challenge in everything that she did. And I don't think, she never made us feel or complained about it or explained or I didn't quite get. It's not something she complained about or something that she whined about or something that she went on about. But I think no fair assessment of her legacy could be complete without fully understanding the amount of opposition that she faced just because she was a woman. History is written by the victors, and in the age-old conflict between patriarchy and equality, unfortunately, we're still living at a point where history is mostly written by men. And she may have become the first female prime minister, a woman prime minister of a Muslim country, but she was also the first elected prime minister whose military leadership refused to meet without their hats on. Sounds odd, right? Why would you not meet the prime minister of your country with your hat on? You know why? Because when your hat's not on, you don't have to salute. And they thought it beneath their dignity to salute Benazir Bhutto because she was a woman. The entire opposition, what was the big rallying cry in late 1980s, 1990s politics in Pakistan? It was that a woman can't lead the Muslim call to prayer, so surely the woman can't be prime minister. A woman can't lead in the mosque, so surely a woman can't be prime minister. What made male politicians ambitious made her greedy. What made male politicians charismatic made her loud. But she took all of this in her stride. She faced it every day of her life, but not once did I hear her make this as an excuse at home or complain that if only I was a man, things would have been a lot easier. So much so, she was a victim of the patriarchy, so much so that one of the justifications for her assassination by extremists too was that she was a woman. But as I say, she never mentioned this. She never saw herself as a victim. But obviously, being a woman played a massive role in her life. She just took all of this in her stride. Obviously, as a result of Benazir Bhutto's struggle, since then we've had Pakistan's first female foreign minister, Pakistan's first female speaker, and most recently, the largest province of Pakistan, the Punjab, has elected their first female chief minister. And the funny thing is, it's exactly the same political party whose argument was that a woman can't be prime minister. And that is Benazir Bhutto's victory. That is Benazir Bhutto's legacy. Another word that no account of her legacy can ignore is brave. She was so brave. I mean, real, like, superwoman, superhuman brave. At the age of 25, I said she's back and took on an Islamic dictator that had just made a woman's worth that half of a man. She endured, obviously, the anguish of her father's assassination, imprisonment, exile, all of that. The 30 years of her political life, she fought 2 military dictatorships, and the periods in between weren't much better. While most of Muslim men, political Muslim men back in Pakistan, quivered in response to the political challenge of violent extremism in the guise of Islamization, she looked them straight in the eye without any fear. Not in my name, not in the name of my country, not in the name of my religion, and above all, not in the name of my people will you practice terrorism and call it Islam. She faced multiple assassination attempts in her life and never batted an eyelid. 3 months before her assassination, she landed at Karachi airport to a reception of more than 3 million people. She was targeted in the Karsaz terrorist attack, which to this day is the largest terrorist attack in Pakistan's history. She survived that attack. But the very next day, she was in hospital comforting the rest of the victims of that attack and back on the campaign trail. Having survived, she did not back down. In every speech, with one breath, she would challenge the military dictator, and with the other breath, she would challenge the terrorists. With literal bombs going off all around her, and threats from the dictator on the other end, she stood valiantly to greet her supporters one last time on the evening of December 27th, 2007. She feared no one, nothing. The terrorist feared her. That's why the cowards killed her. The dictator feared her so much that he left her like a lamb to the slaughter. But she, Benazir, the one without equal, knew no fear. And there's this Urdu poem that was written after her assassination, and there's a couplet in it. And it says, "Tum zinda hokar murda ho, wo murda hokar zinda hai." Which loosely translated, and my Urdu is not great, so my translation's not that great either, but loosely translated means, even while you live, you are already dead. She lives in spite of death. Here, in the halls of Oxford University, the Chamber of the Oxford Union, the United Nations, Westminster, Congress, her political legacy lives on. It inspires young men and women across the world. And of course, there was controversy. In the age before social media, she fell victim to lawfare, character assassination, and a whole host. Up until her dying breath, actually. Ultimately, all such charges were put to rest in the courts of law and have found themselves in the dustbin of history. But regardless, No leader in history worth their salt has come without controversy, and we shouldn't expect the first Muslim woman prime minister to be any different. In fact, she would not have been Benazir had she not been controversial, if she had made no enemies along the way. And that takes me to my favorite Netflix quote from The Crown, which I really think just really said something. You have no enemies, you say. Alas, my friend, the boast is poor. He who has mingled in the fray of duty that the brave endure must have made foes. If you have none, small is the work that you have done. You've hit no traitor on the hip. You've dashed no cup from perjured lips. You've never turned the wrong to right. You've been a coward in the fight. And a coward she was not. Benazir Bhutto's life was not simply a political journey. It was a testament to resilience in the face of adversity, to hope amid despair, to an unshakable belief that the destiny of a nation could and should be shaped by its people. She stood for a Pakistan that was democratic, progressive, and inclusive, a Pakistan that honored its founding principles rather than betrayed them. She was the first woman to lead a Muslim-majority nation, but her fight was never just for women alone. It was for all those who were silenced, all those who were marginalized, and all those who believed in a better tomorrow. When she took the oath of office, she did so with the knowledge that her very existence in that role challenged deep-seated prejudice. And yet she stood firm. She faced conspiracies, military interventions, exiles, and even imprisonment, but she never surrendered. Her belief in democracy was unwavering, but as we have seen, democracy is not an end, it is a process that requires constant vigilance, sacrifice, and courage to speak truth to power. Today, we see democracy under strain across the world. Authoritarian tendencies are on the rise. The voices of the people are often drowned out by the machinery of oppression. Even in countries where democracy was once thought unshakable, we see polarization, disinformation, and erosion of civil liberties. But if my mother's struggle taught us anything, it's democracy is worth fighting for. It's not the privilege of a few, it's a right of all. It's not a gift that is handed down, it is a right that must be constantly reclaimed. Pakistan's own democratic journey has been one of struggle and sacrifice, and yet we persist. As we reflect on my mother's struggle for democracy, it's important to acknowledge the crisis facing Pakistan today. Today's opposition argues that the tools once used against her, political engineering, judicial manipulation, media suppression, are still being deployed. But the context is vastly different. In her time, these tools were wielded to undermine a democratic leader, one who fought for constitutional rule, the supremacy of parliament, and civilian governance. Today, they are allegedly deployed against a populist autocrat whose politics stand in stark contrast to the democratic principles my mother's championed. During the current opposition's time in power, they eroded democratic norms rather than strengthened them. They openly embraced authoritarian tendencies, used state institutions to target their opponents, attacked the judiciary when it ruled against them, and sought to undermine the very parliament they were elected to lead. Their government cracked down on dissent, curtailed press freedoms, and systematically marginalized opposition parties. Even now, while they present themselves as victims of political repression, they fail to acknowledge that the very mechanisms allegedly being used against them were legitimized and weaponized under their own rule. This is not to say that Pakistan's democracy is thriving. Far from it. The political landscape remains fraught with challenges, and the space for genuine democratic discourse continues to shrink. And equating what's going on today with the democratic struggles of leaders like my mother is just not historically inaccurate. It's a dangerous distortion. The fight for democracy is not about individual... That's my glucose monitor, so... it's too far away from me. The fight... Sorry. Hold on. The fight for democracy is not about individual personalities. It's about institutions, principles, and rule of law. A true democracy does not serve the whims of one leader, nor does it crumble when they face legal or political accountability. Pakistan's future cannot and must not be dictated by populism, authoritarianism masquerading as reform. It must be built on constitutional democracy, on an independent judiciary, a free press, and the empowerment of its people. The lessons of my mother's legacy is clear, that democracy is not about any single leader. It is about a system that guarantees the rights and voices of all. And that is the fight that must continue today. I stand before you, not just as the son of Benazir Bhutto, but as a Pakistani that believes our country has lost its way and deserves so much better. My mother's vision for Pakistan was one where democracy flourished, where economic opportunity was available to all, where women are empowered and where minorities are protected and extremism has no place. That vision is still possible, but it requires courage, unity, and resilience. Pakistan must reclaim its democratic promise. It must uphold the rule of law, protect fundamental freedoms, and ensure that power rests with the people. This is not just Pakistan's struggle. It is a struggle for every nation that believes in democracy and justice. The people of Pakistan have the right to demand a better future. They deserve a better future than what the Pakistan's populist opposition record shows that they would do if they were back in power, and they deserve better than what the current government is delivering to them today. They also certainly do not deserve another military coup. So what are our options? For those of us who believe in Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto's legacy, in a peaceful, prosperous, and progressive Pakistan, at peace with ourselves and our neighbors, unconfined by our internal political dysfunction, Pakistan's potential unleashed on the world stage would be formidable. That is exactly what the people of Pakistan deserve. 65% of our population is under the age of 35. Much of them have become delusioned with the direction our country is taking. I too feel myself asking, what is one to do? Caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, between out-of-date status quo politics on the one hand and egotistical authoritarian populism on the other. It's times like this that I would give anything to be able to turn to my mother for guidance, for advice. I do know, as my mother's son, I can't just accept the way things are. I'm not going to presume to know all the answers. I will be beginning a listening tour back home in Pakistan, where I will seek to engage with the younger generation in a positive, productive discussion on how we can go forward. What can the new generation, a majority of my country, do to reclaim our country's destiny? I will seek their guidance on how we can use the space we do have to engage in positive, not authoritarian, populist politics. A politics that is productive, a productive politics, and not a partisan, polarized politics. I first entered politics at the age of 19. I became a member of parliament in my 20s, and at the age of 34, I was the youngest foreign minister in Pakistan's history. But then My grandfather was president and prime minister of the country, and then he went on to be hanged. My mother was the first prime minister we've covered. She too was assassinated. So you might think me mad for continuing on the path for now. Then again, I'm Benazir Bhutto's son, and that will never change. I would never forgive myself if I was to wash my hands of everything now, especially given where we are as a country today. My country too deserves to become Benazir Pakistan, one without equal, and I'm committed to continuing her work no matter what it takes. As far as Benazir Bhutto's legacies, politicians leave legacies, and Benazir's politics will have a legacy. But this sort of galaxy's worth of politicians across history, only few managed to do what she has done. And she's moved on into legend. She has, and that, I would say, is her legacy. Thank you, everybody.